All right, folks. Well, thank you for, again, being a part of the family meeting and being here tonight. My section's not going to be that long at all. Again, we're going to try to do our best to honor your time. But I do have to say this. I hope that your heart has been as encouraged and challenged as mine. I'm just sitting down there, and I've been able to listen. And there were at least 3 or 4 moments I just had to burst out in gratitude in my heart and say, God, thank you for this church. And not the mortar or the brick, but when I say the church, I'm talking about you and the people that make up this church. I personally sit there, and for Paige LaPonzi to talk about from the scriptures and how it's sin to not share the gospel, I'm like, man, that wore me out. I was convicted by that, challenged. That's the way it ought to be. We ought to spur one another on toward love and good deeds. And so that's what this family meeting is always intended to be. It's intended to be where you see your family and you hear stories of what God's doing in this church family. So I just encourage you, over the next few months, we do this 4 times a year. And we would really love to see it grow in participation. And I think a lot of folks think it's a business meeting. We're dealing with the business of the church. And Pastor Gene gets up and reads budget reports or something. That's not what this is. It is. That'd be okay, Gene. But the idea is for you to hear and celebrate what God's doing in your families. This is a big deal for us. To celebrate what God's doing in our family. So I'm going to transition a little bit, and we're going to talk about really our 4th goal that we've held out over the past few weeks, and that's the whole area of giving. The whole idea of, as Paul said, this idea of radical generosity with urgency. So I just want to say this before I share a couple things, and then Eric Porter's going to come up and join me in just a few minutes, but before I share a couple things, let me kind of set this context. This is a family meeting, as I said, and family meetings are to do what we've done. It's to celebrate what God's doing and, man, just be so excited what God's doing in the lives of people. But family meetings are also a time when we can be the family and we can honestly discuss areas as a church where we are not quite where we want to be yet. In other words, some areas where we can be real honest with each other and say, okay, there's great growth here, but we got some real room to grow and we've got some challenges. So when we talk about the area of giving, I'm going to be just really honest with you tonight of where we are as a family because it's family in the room. It's family in the room, and I say that for a couple of ways. One is you're here tonight, and you're probably vested. I mean, you're involved here. This is your church home. This is your family. I would imagine that the majority of you, maybe, in this room are already faithful, regular givers, maybe. I hope that's the case. So I want you to hear what I'm going to say over the next few minutes, maybe through these ears and with this perspective as we talk about giving. 2 things. One, all right, Lord, how am I and how's my family in the area of giving and honoring you first? Proverbs 3, we talk about it. Honor the Lord from your wealth. Honor the Lord first in the area of giving. So I want you to hear it from that. Okay, how am I doing? How's my family doing in this area? But then, as influencers, as people who would call this home, I want you to leave here tonight and feel some weight of ownership and say, okay, not only how am I personally doing, how now can I advance our church in some areas with people I have influence? Maybe my life group or people that I talk to. Or how can I share my giving story? Or how can I be an influencer? I mean, I'm doing okay in the area of giving. How can you be an influencer so we can advance the ball in this area? So what I want to do for just a couple minutes here is I want to take it this way, and I want to ask the question, all right, where are we? What is our present reality as a church in the area of giving? I want you to know that. I want you to know because you're family. And it's not something you sit and go, well, that's a staff problem or a staff issue or a staff challenge. It's a we issue as a family. If my little daughter comes home and she says, Dad, there's this bully. He's bothering me at school, and he's driving me crazy. And I'm not going to say, well, honey, that's your problem. Go figure it out. I'm going to say, you know what, sweetheart, that's a family problem, and we're going to walk through it together. It's a family challenge. So we have some challenges in front of us in the area of giving that are for us as a family to walk through. So here's our present reality as a church family in 3 different areas in the area of finance. And I want you to know this. First is in the area of our general budget. Our general budgeted giving. Now, when we say general budget, just so you know, that's the area that any undesignated tithe or offering that comes in goes into this area. It's where we challenge our people to give first as to the general budget. This is how we operate as a church from buildings to personnel to budgeted items, facilities, lights, mission partners, next-gen ministry. All that comes out of our general budget. It's how we do what we do as a church primarily. So right now, at this point in the year, we're middle of September, and there's going to be a graph up. We're about 65% in the year. We are behind in giving in the general budget area by a dollar amount of $153,000. Now, that's out of a budget that we agreed upon as a church of $2.3 million. That's our operating budget. That's what it takes really to do ministry here at a church our size and minister to the number of people we minister to. So at this point in the year, we're behind. I want you to know that. Secondly, I want you to know about the Give to Go challenge that we have. Give to Go is the account that all of those dollars go out of our church. It goes to send people out of our church, like the mission teams that you saw on stage here earlier. It goes to local and international and global partnerships. For example, $25,000 toward Portland and Remedy City comes straight out of Give to Go. That's an over and above opportunity we have. This year we had a $100,000 goal so we could continue to be radically generous in the missional area. Right now, we are $19,000 behind in the Give to Go area. And then thirdly, we had as a goal this year that by the end of 2016, we hoped and trusted the Lord to be debt-free on our facilities as a church. Man, a great goal to be able to free up so much funds that we would continue to be able to be generous in the area of missions and other things. So right now, if we continue on our current giving pace to our debt reduction, we will end the year still $105,000 short in the area of being debt-free. So we would enter 2017 still with a debt that we hope to be able to retire by the end of the year. Now, let me again be really clear with you. So what does it mean? So what does that mean for a church? Well, what does that mean practically for us? And I want you to bear the weight of this, and I want you to know this as a family. Here's what it means. First, I want you to know that staff, volunteer leaders have done an awesome job this year of cutting in some areas and trimming budgets and trimming expenses as much as we can. There's not a lot of fluff in what we do. There's not a lot of fluff in our budget at all. It's been a good exercise for our team and our volunteers. So that purging has already happened and continues to happen to a degree. But man, we've done a great job of cutting out the excess. Secondly, that means that we're currently operating monthly and really weekly. We're pulling on a regular basis from reserve funds that we have. Every week we have a need to meet budget of $45,000. Right now we're giving at a pace of right around $40,000 to $41,000. So that means we're going to be behind every week. That means we have to pull from our savings. And that savings continues to dwindle, and we would prefer not to do that as a church, just like you as a family. You'd prefer not to do that. Thirdly, that means anytime you're operating in a deficit like we are right now, here's what that means. Same thing it means for your family at home. Okay, the numbers need to match. So what that means is, man, we've got ideas, we've got dreams, we've got ministry opportunities, we've got things we want to do, but when the money's not there like it needs to be, here's what we're forced to say. Yes to some things and no to some others. And some really good things. And I'm saying all this again, as a family, I want us to feel the weight of what it means when we may say, you know, we're not making budget as a church. So that means that we're having to say, just take, for example, the family discipleship plan. If our giving and if the funds were there, we could be much further down the line in our family discipleship plan. We could already have the middle school aspect of that most likely fully developed, but right now we can't because we've just had to say no to some things. Greatly limits our ability in some ways to continue to take care of our staff team like we would like to. It limits some key staffing issues that we want to continue to advance in. There's some facility things that we've just had to say no to. There's some needs here in Gray. There's some needs in Johnson City that we've had to say no to. And next week we're going to come and we're not even going to have lights. No, I'm just kidding. But there are some things that we've wanted to do. Some major renovations that we've wanted to do at this facility, some things at the Johnson City campus we've wanted to do. We just had to say no, and that's okay. But I want you to understand, anytime we're at a deficit, it means you have to say no to some things. Also, as Paul mentioned earlier, when we talk about the missional opportunities that we have as a church, the urgency that we have, when our giving is not where we want it to be across the board, It limits our impact missionally. Just does. Let me give you some examples. This ethnos movement that we mentioned earlier. We have an organization we have the opportunity to partner with that we can be a major funder, a major partner that's going to reach unreached people groups in Africa. That's why they exist. We're very limited in what we can do financially and take on a new partner. We have a church planner right now in the pipeline in our church who we want to send and be a financial part of our next church plant. We're highly limited financially in what we can do with that. We want to increase our International Mission Board giving. We want to train and send more pastors. We want to be involved in things like the Esther School in Africa. We want to be involved locally with things like Bethany services, adoption and foster care as a church, and all these things. Some things we just can't do. So the point is, I share all that with you to be honest in a family meeting and say, I want us as a family to bear the weight of that. So, what is our goal then when we talk about giving? What are the goals that we've held out? Now, let me be very clear. Shame on me, and shame on Pastor Gene, and shame on our elders. What's this? If the only time, I'm standing up, this is getting serious. If the only time we talk about giving is when we're not making budget, shame on us. Now, that's not been our pattern. We teach on giving, we model giving, because the goal of giving as a church is not to meet budget. The goal of giving is to honor God, and that every person that calls a church home to experience the joy and the obedience of trusting God in the area of giving. And watch this. When we're doing that, when we're all the goal that we held out, every person in our church giving faithfully at 10% and giving over and above that. Those that are already giving to say, you know what, I'm going to step it up and give over and above in the areas of our church. When we're doing that and we're honoring God, budget's no issue. We're meeting budget, and we have all the resources necessary to do what God's called us to do. So what's the goal? The goal is every person who calls Tri-Cities home, trust God, honor God first in the area of giving. 10% is a great place to start. If that's you in this room and you're not giving at that level, like David Wallace said earlier, there ought to be some growth in our lives that we're growing in the area of trusting God. If you're already giving in that area, challenge you to give sacrificially and over and above. And as influencers, Eric, won't you come on up? I'm going to ask Eric just to share briefly what God's been doing in his life. You guys are influencers. How can I, through conversations, in my life groups, and where I'm involved with people of our church, how can I be an influencer to share and influence that we are giving generously as a church?